Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. Don't forget to subscribe. And this week's deep dive is going to be into Mark Zuckerberg. Now, if you didn't know, in April of 2019, so about 6+ years ago at this point, I did a video entitled, "It's Time to Put Mark Zuckerberg in Jail." And by virtue of that, I essentially listed out the litany of sins from Facebook's inception to that current day, as well as just notes on Mark Zuckerberg as a human being. And it's been a long time coming for me to redo another video of this. So strap in, because we are going to cover quite a bit, because Facebook, now Meta, aka Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, etc., has shown time and again that it's willing to find virtually any way it can to use your data and even your likeness to try to make money. And it gets so much worse. Now, I don't begrudge any innovative company from trying to find new ways to generate wealth, but it also has a responsibility to safeguard its users, not to mention simply being honest with us. Facebook has not only failed miserably in this vein, but also has actively worked to keep secrets, basically the plethora of ways that they were abusing our privacy, while publicly telling the world that they cared about us. They cared about our privacy and security, when it's the furthest thing from the truth. And as you'll see, and I will show my work and cite my sources, all of this is Googleable for the record. Their sins include, in brief, just an explosion of disinformation that has been driving a wedge into modern democratic societies while tacitly aiding the Russias and the Chinas of the world. They've caused an explosion in addiction and depression amongst adults, older millennials, Gen X. They've exploded depression and suicidality rates in younger generations, starting at around 2011, 2012, in those grouped 13 to 19. They've helped create a literal genocide in Myanmar. They've turned a blind eye to war crimes occurring on their platforms. They've assisted domestic violent extremist groups in organizing across the United States. They've killed news feeds for an entire continent, which harmed public services from the government there. It was a huge problem for them. They cut their trust and safety teams completely that were fighting disinformation. They've prioritized anger and rage for click traffic and money, and on and on and on. And we're going to go through absolutely all of these and so much more. And through it all, Zuckerberg himself has not seemed to care about his users, their privacy, the suicides, the literal suicides as a result of his choices, and more. He has to be, I think, one of the worst human beings alive today, and whistleblower after whistleblower after whistleblower has confirmed this. And so, with that, let's go through the sins of Facebook, and we'll dive into Mark Zuckerberg himself as well, and I will give you some of the worst highlights of this. But we're going to start in September 2006 with an NBC News article, and essentially it's about Facebook debuting its news feed. It was brand new for then. So at the time, Facebook had 8 million users, many of whom were not happy about their posts, all of them automatically being sent to all of their friends. Facebook was private initially, but everything that you were doing, now all of your friends were getting alerted to. And over 1 million of those 8 million users joined protest groups on the platform over that move, arguing that it was too intrusive. Facebook weathered the storm, didn't kill the feature, and here we are, billions of users in. In December of 2007, according to NBC News, Facebook debuted Beacon. Now, this allowed companies to track purchases by Facebook users and then notify their friends of what they bought without user consent. Zuckerberg apologized on December 6, 2007, stating that the users now had the ability to opt out, but they didn't actually kill Beacon itself at that time. Facebook began selling ads that displayed people's profile photo next to commercial messages that are shown to their friends. Basically, and this for the record was back in the day, if you rented a movie from Blockbuster.com and then posted that to Facebook, Facebook would ask if the user wanted to share this with their friends, and if they said yes, all of their friends would receive a message with that ad for Blockbuster with a picture of their friend. Now, this starts essentially the privacy violations that we are soon to see. Now, also during this time period, according to the New York Times, Facebook was being investigated by the Federal Trade Commission. Why, you ask? The FTC expressed concern that advertisers may access too much information about people's online activities. Facebook said it was only using information that its members chose to share, while the site was basically using information on behalf of the advertisers, and Facebook was not giving it to marketers. We now know that was an absolute lie, thanks to the Cambridge Analytica scandal and many other scandals that have come to light over the literal years that we're going to be talking about. Now, in November of 2011, according to NBC News, basically Facebook finally settled with the FTC. Facebook agreed to undergo an independent privacy evaluation every other year for 20 years. On top of that, the regulator said that Facebook falsely claimed that third-party apps were able to access only the data needed to operate, when in fact the apps could access basically all of your personal information. Once again, Facebook lied and the FTC caught them. In July of 2003, according to the Washington Post, Facebook tried a, quote, mood manipulation experiment on 500,000 Facebook users. Facebook altered their news feeds to show them either more positive or more negative posts. The purpose was to study how emotions could spread on social media. There was no opt-in or opt-out feature. So imagine being clinically depressed or even suicidal, and Facebook is one of the only ways you connect with your friends in the outside world, and suddenly your feed is nothing but negative. They have literally no regard for the feelings of others when they are making these decisions. They don't care, and it's very consistent, and we now know that anger is absolutely prioritized, and that was probably the study that showed they got more engagement and therefore more money. Screw this company. In 2014, Facebook promised it would limit access to developers in terms of data mining and violating their privacy. They wrote that in a blog post, but Facebook lied because in 2015, current and former Facebook employees spoke to the Wall Street Journal and said that Facebook couldn't actually keep track of how many developers were previously downloading data. And beyond this, thanks to Cambridge Analytica, we know the practice continued well beyond that. Senator Ted Cruz's campaign in 2016 was using this information, as was Steve Bannon on behalf of Trump. So it got political. And again, it's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about data privacy. They're building psychological profiles. In February of 2018, a Belgian court ordered Facebook to stop tracking people across the entire internet. Basically, that stems from the integration of Facebook technology and cookies into third-party sites. If you go to a site, let's say to shop for a car, Facebook knows that you're there due to the technology and will tailor advertising to your car preferences. So if you're shopping for a Ford or a Mercedes or a Ferrari, you're going to start seeing those ads on Facebook. Now, even if you don't have a Facebook account, these sites are still sending your tracking info to you about, basically about you to Facebook, even though you don't, like I said, have that account. The court ordered the deletion of this illegally collected data by Facebook, and this rule applied only to Belgians, though. So Facebook didn't appeal the rule, and it's happening to us here in the United States and all over the world right now. In March of 2018, according to NBC, Facebook knew about the massive data theft that was Cambridge Analytica and did absolutely nothing. Mark Zuckerberg's response, only when they were caught, was to apologize and quote-unquote promise changes. And we know that really hasn't happened. In March 2018, according to Variety, Mark Zuckerberg addressed the issue, writing in a blog post, and I quote, "I've been working to understand exactly what happened and how to make sure this doesn't happen again. The good news is that the most important actions to prevent this from happening again today, we have already taken years ago, but we also made mistakes. There's more to do, and we need to step up and do it," end quote. We now know they really didn't do much. So in March of 2018, according to New York Magazine, Facebook was not cleaning out deleted history. Quote, "Facebook makes it easy to obtain a zip file of all the data it has on you, your status updates, your friend list, your messages, and as I and several people I spoke with were surprised to discover, every video you ever filmed on the platform, including videos you never published," end quote. In other words, they weren't getting rid of anything, even though their privacy policy stated they'd keep it around for no more than 90 days, primarily because they could probably data mine it and sell it to advertisers. Now, in April of 2018, NBC reported that it got worse, basically in terms of Cambridge Analytica, when the accounting of users impacted was 50 million, and then they had to redeclare to say 87 million users were actually impacted, obviously mostly Americans in that. In May of 2018, Reuters reported that a whistleblower came forward to say that Cambridge Analytica had used the data to run voter suppression campaigns. Facebook did nothing, absolutely nothing, to curb this while these campaigns were going on their platforms. In May of 2018, according to Bloomberg, Congress released all 3,500 plus Facebook ads that were bought by the Russians. The House Intelligence Committee released basically in May of 2018 more than 3,000 Facebook ads from 2015 to late 2017. It was about 3,600 ads or so, and those were bought by the Russian-based Internet Research Agency run by Yevgeny Prigozhin out of St. Petersburg, Russia. Basically, the company that is also linked to Russian-backed propaganda efforts across social media use these ads on Facebook and on Instagram to try and create political chaos and hurt democracy. This is essentially what they were doing. They were going into places where there were protests for either Black Lives Matter or another type of movement, and they were basically running wedge ads based on demographics. So the black population of a city would say, the police are beating us, they're hurting us, they're killing us, get rid of the police, fight the cops, yada yada. Where the white population would get, we have to back our boys in blue, the cops are protecting us, and everything, driving that psychological wedge throughout society more than 3,500 times with these ads. It's absolutely insane, and they just let it go on, and it only cost the Russians about $130,000 to do it. In June of 2018, Vice News reported that Facebook was offering the world a free VPN, or virtual private network, for security and privacy called Onavo, but it did anything but that. Facebook admitted to Congress in a hearing that they were using the VPN to secretly track where you were going and what you were doing outside of the Facebook's ecosystem. Remember, the VPN acts as a gateway. So if you're going to ESPN or Google or wherever the heck you're going, they're going to understand now where you're going. It's another data mining tactic under the guise of giving you security and privacy. And so while basically Zuckerberg was apologizing for violating the privacy of pretty much everybody and lying, about taking privacy seriously, they were just turning data mining up to 11. It got so bad that Apple actually pulled Onavo from the App Store for violating its user privacy. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. But this is what this company does under the leadership of this jerk. Now, in June of 2018, according to Politico, we learned that Facebook shared personal user data with multiple device makers, including device makers based in China with ties to the Chinese government. We also now know, due to the whistleblower Sarah Wynne Williams, just how far Mark Zuckerberg was willing to bend and what he was able to do or wanted to do to get Facebook into China. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And it's around this era. And we'll talk about that shortly. Now, because of this data sharing with Chinese companies, Congressman David Cicilline, a Democrat of Rhode Island, said, quote, "Sure looks like Zuckerberg lied to Congress about whether users have complete control over who sees our data on Facebook. This needs to be investigated, and the people responsible need to be held accountable." Yeah, and he hasn't been. So it's Mark Zuckerberg. It's absolutely nuts. In July of 2018, New Republic published an article, quote, "Facebook is still abusing your privacy," end quote, which dives into the fact that beyond all the privacy violations I have mentioned thus far, Facebook found another way to make money and violate your privacy, and that's with facial recognition. The New York Times reported that, quote, "more than a dozen privacy and consumer groups and at least a few officials argue that the company's use of facial recognition has violated people's privacy by not obtaining appropriate consent," end quote. July of 2018, and according to government announcements, we learned that Facebook was now under investigation by 4 different federal agencies, including the FTC, the SEC, and the DOJ. In December of 2018, NBC reported, and we learned that other major tech companies had such deep access to Facebook that they could read your private messages. Think about that. Outside tech companies, meaning third parties, not Facebook, could get into your messenger. We are talking about Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, and others. Now, in January of 2019, according to CNBC, we learned Facebook had a research app users could download that would pay them to allow Facebook to deeply data mine their phones and basically understand all aspects of what they were doing. I have no issue with this, except for one thing. They were entering into contractual monetary agreements with minors. Age 13 and up were able to sign, and that is completely abhorrent to me. I can't imagine wanting to let kids, for example, 13, who cannot sign a legal contract until 18 in the country of the United States, and they're letting them do this, and they're paying them for that. And what 13-year-old's going to think? Oh, $20, I'll take $20, and you can have my data. You're not thinking longitudinally at that age. In February of 2019, according to CNBC, we learned that if Facebook considers you a threat, and I might have just made the list again, they can and are turning on tracking they're basically turning on tracking in your Facebook to keep tabs on where you are. You have no notification of this, and the rules were arbitrary, though for some reason, like let's say threatening violence against Facebook employees was rather obvious. If you're leveling a death threat against Zuckerberg or whoever, and for the record, I am not, I do think he needs his day in court, and I do think I am giving you basically any prosecutor the evidence they're going to need for this. But here we are. Now, in March of 2019, according to CBS News, Facebook stored passwords for hundreds of millions and tens of thousands of Instagram users in plain text and had been doing it for years. In other words, that super awesome password you had for Instagram, they could read it. Thousands of their employees could read your passwords. And how many people use the same password for Facebook, Instagram, banking, everything else? That's crazy. It's abhorrent to me as a cybersecurity professional. April 2019, and we're still in 2019. I'm still just covering stuff that I did 6 years ago. We haven't even gotten to the new stuff yet. According to NBC, Facebook came out with an account verification system that was asking for your email password, not your Facebook password, which could potentially give basically Facebook access to your email account, and that's exactly what happened. People gave their email accounts to this because you're signing up with your Gmail, whatever account, and boom, Facebook was getting into your email accounts in April of 2019. And also in April 2019, researchers at UpGuard, according to UpGuard, found hundreds of millions of users' personal information being stored on Amazon's web services, AWS, servers by third parties. In one case, somebody could easily access personal information on a single database of over 500 million Facebook users. Facebook never bothered to control their third parties, and so we learned that in 2015 via a Wall Street Journal article that I mentioned earlier. But they essentially found over 100,000 of these independent databases of a whole bunch of information from Facebook taken and given and ingested by third parties. Your data, my data, everybody's data is in multiple databases, and we have no idea who has these things. Also in April 2019, NBC basically dropped the bombshell that thousands of internal documents, memos, etc. show that Facebook was using users' private data as a leverage against its competitors. It would give deep access to friends and companies that paid top dollar, like Amazon, who had access to your messages, or it would cut off access to private, basically information or competition, like competing messenger apps. This basically is what prompted me to do the video back in 2019. Also in April 2019, if you remember the whole plain text passwords in Instagram, Facebook went back to their blog and changed that Instagram part from thousands to millions. In other words, they knew they were doing it and they had to up the game because the regulators are going to be coming. They tried to get this one to fly under the radar by not doing a new blog post, just editing a current one, but we're looking for those things. April 2019 is also when we learned that the account verification system I mentioned earlier in April of that year wanted your email password, basically not your Facebook password. Users were reporting that they were seeing Facebook imports of their entire address book without any prompts or consent. Seriously. They can't stop data mining even when there's a massive spotlight on them. And if you gave them your email password and you haven't changed it since 2019, they're probably still in your email now. Now, in June of 2019, according to NBC News, Zuckerberg oversaw plans to consolidate basically Facebook's power and control of competitors by treating all of its users' data as a bargaining chip while publicly proclaiming to be protecting that data, according to about 4,000 pages of leaked company documents that span 2011 to 2015. Again, according to NBC News. In some cases, Facebook would reward companies by giving them access, as I mentioned previously. In other cases, it would deny user data access to rivals. And this is essentially the breakdown that we got a couple months after that broke. So, the example of helping a friend. Facebook gave Amazon extended access to user data, including Messenger, and because Amazon was spending money on Facebook advertising and partnering with the social network on its launch of the Amazon Fire smartphone that obviously went nowhere. Now, an example of cutting this off, in another case, Facebook discussed cutting off access to user data for a messaging app that had grown too popular and was viewed as a competitor, according to the documents. We believe that is Snapchat, but that was not confirmed back then. Now, in July of 2019, 2019, the FTC approved a fine of roughly $5 billion against Facebook for mishandling users' information. According to 3 people briefed with the case, it ended up being a landmark decision for the FTC and an aggressive stance. But understand that in July of 2019, $5 billion seems like a lot. Facebook was valued at $585 billion, which means that was less than 1% of their entire worth. And stock shares actually rose because they thought the FTC was going to come down like a hammer, and that was not even a slap on the wrist for a company of that size. Now, September of 2019, according to TechCrunch, New York Attorney General Letitia James announced on September 6th of that year that she was leading an investigation into Facebook over antitrust issues. In other words, whether Facebook used its social media dominance to engage in anti-competitive behavior. And Attorney General James, yes, they did. And we know that. And we've known it for a while. Now, in February 2020, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, or EFF, basically cited that the Ring doorbell's Android version of the app was packed with third-party trackers, basically to gather users' personally identifiable information. Facebook, via its Graph API, basically was scraping a whole bunch of user data, time zones, device models, screen resolutions, unique identifiers, so they knew exactly who had Ring doorbells, and here we are. Now, in March of 2020, according to the Wall Street Journal, Facebook researchers basically said that they received a slide presentation that was posted to Facebook's internal message board that said, and I quote, 32% of teen girls said that when they felt bad about their bodies, Instagram made them feel worse. Comparisons on Instagram can change how young women view and describe themselves, end quote. For the past few years, Facebook had been conducting studies into how the photo sharing app affected millions of young users, and repeatedly the company's researchers found that Instagram is harmful for a sizable percentage of them, most notably teen girls. This is something I've talked about extensively, the damage that Facebook has done, and this is March of 2020, and we're going to come back to this later on in the timeline. Now, in August of that year, Sky News reported that Facebook pledged to crack down on anti-Semitic content, but it did not actually categorize Holocaust denial as hate speech, according to the think tank ISD, which means that such posts were still spreading at the time on the platform. And ISD, which is the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, found hundreds of thousands of users across 36 groups in Facebook that were looking at Holocaust denial material in its research. And here's where it gets terrifying, because after the researchers clicked through these groups, Facebook's algorithms started recommending other Holocaust denial pages to them. So much for fighting anti-Semitism. Now, in November of 2020, the Associated Press reported that academics, journalists, and First Amendment lawyers were rallying behind NYU's researchers in a showdown with Facebook over its demand that they halt the collection of data showing who is being micro-targeted by political ads in what is, and at the time was, the world's most dominant social media platform. Researchers say the disputed tool was vital to understand how Facebook had been used as a conduit for disinformation and manipulation. They are the biggest purveyors of disinformation their platforms are in the world. It's not even close. TikTok is a second place, though. Now, in October 16th, in a letter to the researchers, a Facebook executive demanded they disable the special plug-in for Chrome and Firefox browsers that was being used by 6,500 volunteers across the United States and delete the data they obtained. And for the record, I was one of those 6,500. The plugin let researchers see the ads that were shown to each volunteer. Facebook let advertisers tailor ads on specific demographics that go far beyond race, age, gender, and political preference. As I mentioned with the Internet Research Agency, back with Yevgeny Prigozhin, the wedge that they drove into society was absolutely profound. Now, in December of 2020, according to The Verge, Facebook was actually deleting evidence of literal war crimes on its platform. Now, Facebook banned the sale of historical artifacts in June of that year. Many of the posts were in Arabic, and Facebook lacked the expertise or manpower to properly enforce their new policies. So, Facebook basically was able to identify, or rather when Facebook was able to identify groups that were essentially flouting its guidelines, the company just deleted it. And that was a huge problem because it expunges crucial documentation and evidence for researchers and law enforcement. The researchers studying stolen art, the law enforcement trying to get the war criminals. And selling basically antiquities from a war zone is a literal war crime. Quote, this is critical evidence for repatriation efforts and war crimes, according to Katie Paul, co-director of the Athar project. Quote, Facebook has created a problem, and rather than turning that into something they could contribute to, they are making it worse. And the implications go way beyond art theft. Since 2014, looted antiquities have been a major funding source for terrorist organizations like ISIS on Facebook. The Middle East is got a ton of cultural artifacts, and the market for this is not nearly as regulated as arms trafficking, drug sales, all this kind of stuff. So it's a huge, huge problem, and Facebook really harmed law enforcement and recovery efforts. In February of 2021, according to Cyberscoop, Facebook was basically trying to stop legitimate phishing training. Enterprise Spam Filter and cyber awareness educator Proofpoint filed a lawsuit against Facebook, arguing that they should be allowed to use these domains to basically imitate Facebook and Instagram, and they are 100% correct. This is how we train people to spot the fake Facebooks of the world. Facebook should want that. And if I can be able to send, let's say, to a whole bunch of users a fake Facebook and they click on it, now we know who needs training and we can teach them how to spot fake Facebook, which might get them infected. That's just helping everybody out, and they don't want to do it. That just sucks. In March of 2021, according to The Guardian, Facebook was considering launching a version of its popular Instagram platform, social media platform for children under the age of 13. And they were pretty excited to do it. They wanted to make Instagram, that which was depressing teens, they wanted to make it for children. My God. In March of 2021, basically, security researcher Saugat Pakharel basically put this out into the world. Pakharel requested a copy of photos and direct messages from the photo sharing app Instagram. He was sent data that he had deleted more than a year ago, showing the information had never been taken or removed off Instagram servers. Instagram says they take around 90 days to completely remove data, but other researchers had also found similar issues with this. So that's a huge problem. Because if they are hanging on to all of this, they're data mining it, selling it, doing God knows what. In April of 2021, an internal Facebook email accidentally sent to Belgium newspaper Data News had revealed its strategy for dealing with the leaking of account details from 533 million users in 106 countries. Quote, publications have offered more critical takes on Facebook's response, framing it as evasive, a deflection of blame and absent of apology for the users impacted, end quote. Still waiting for that apology. May of 2021, as a way to convince users to enable tracking across other apps and websites, Facebook deployed the tactic of telling users that they must enable tracking as part of app tracking transparency frameworks in iOS 14.5 if they want to help keep Facebook and Instagram free of charge. In other words, let us track you or we'll bill you. It's terrible. June 2021, Reuters. The Texas Supreme Court allowed 3 people who became entangled with their abusers through Facebook to sue, saying Facebook was not a, quote, lawless no man's land, end quote, immune from liability for human trafficking. Meta separately faced hundreds of lawsuits from families of teenagers and younger children who claim to have suffered mental health problems by becoming addicted to Facebook and Instagram. Some school districts also filed lawsuits over this problem because we were starting to see the actual results of this. Now, June of 2021, according to Gizmodo, Facebook found a new way to capitalize on thoughts, prayers, and data from the religious side of its user base. Basically, during that month, the company confirmed that it began expanding a new feature called prayer posts that will let members of a particular Facebook group literally ask for or offer up prayers for other folks on the platform. A Facebook spokesperson confirmed that the feature had been in testing for over a year before quietly rolling it out to the masses in the past few months at that time. Back in April of that year as well, Robert Jones, who runs the Public Religion Research Institute, was one of the first public faces to actually ask the company why on earth they were doing this. Again, imagine tracking it. You don't have any kind of status, but you're offering prayers to Jesus or Mohammed or Vishnu, whatever it is. Now they're tracking your religion. That's a problem. It's a huge issue. July 2021, the Surgeon General of the United States at the time, Dr. Vivek Murthy, warned in that month that health misinformation is, quote, a serious threat to public health, end quote, and the administration directly called out social media giant Facebook for not doing enough to spread the basically stop the spread of false information on its platform. Meetings between the Biden administration and Facebook were tense, according to sources, and here we are. We saw that throughout the pandemic. Just no filters whatsoever, no real checks on this. They were letting a ton of stuff go through. In September of 2021, according to NPR, basically in what appeared at first to be good news, whistleblower documents revealed that Facebook had a team responsible for reporting on and solving unhealthy social media use. The team, which focused solely on user well-being, investigated the ways in which people used Facebook and was tasked with finding ways to improve upon the platform. Now, according to internal documents inspected by the Wall Street Journal, Facebook shut the team down in 2019. And what's worse is that the team appeared to have been on the cusp of making major suggestions that could have benefited users at the cost of time spent on the platform, which is absolutely crucial to Facebook's ability to earn revenue off of you. You have to be on the platform scrolling through ads, seeing things, engaging things in order for them to be viable for advertisers to buy time on their platforms. And so before they were disbanded, the researchers conducted basically a survey of 20,000 users and found that 1 in 8 engaged in quote-unquote problematic use of Facebook, meaning addiction, basically anger getting ramped up. It's a huge problem. In September of 2021, the Wall Street Journal reported that Facebook had built a system that had exempted all high-profile users, or some basically had exempted these high-profile users from some or all of its rules, according to basically documents reviewed by said Wall Street Journal. The program was known as Crosscheck or Xcheck and was initially intended as a quality control measure for actions taken against high-profile accounts, including celebrities, politicians, and journalists. Donald Trump, for example, was one of those in the Crosscheck program. Today, or rather back then in 2021, and it's probably still going on now, it's shielding millions of VIP users from normal enforcement process. In other words, you can post something that's deeply offensive, and because you're not a VIP, you don't have millions of followers, etc., they can ban you, they can put you in Facebook jail for 10 days, 30 days, but all of the other crazy stuff that we saw a whole bunch of people putting out there, they would get a pass because they were VIPs that were protected by this Crosscheck or Xcheck platform. Some users were whitelisted, in other words, rendered basically immune from enforcement, while others basically were allowed to violate the rules at will. So it's absolutely nuts. Also in September of 2021, the Wall Street Journal reported that Facebook knew Instagram was seriously harming teen girls and did nothing. In 2020, researchers inside Instagram were studying basically this kind of experience and asking whether it was part of a broader phenomenon, and their findings confirm this. Quote, and I think I said this before, 32% of teen girls said that when they felt bad about their bodies, Instagram made them feel worse. Comparisons on Instagram can change how young women view and describe themselves as well. And think about this. If you're that, 14-year-old girl or whatever it is, you're in your awkward phase. And as a 14-year-old boy, we all had awkward phases, girls or boys. But imagine going on Instagram and seeing like a Kim Kardashian that looks absolutely perfect due to Photoshop, now AI, etc. You're never going to think you're going to compare to that. And Facebook did absolutely nothing to help stem that tide, because that underage girl sitting on Instagram is making them money. Screw this company. October of 2021, Facebook misled investors about shrinking user base, and that's according to an ex-employee. Now, the company's solution was to target 6-year-olds based on a new document at the time that was released by whistleblower Frances Haugen. Facebook, basically now, obviously at this point in the timeline, they're rebranded Meta, but Facebook appears to have been planning to recruit 6-year-olds to various apps within its portfolio. The first page with the document is a photograph of a job ad for various child research roles under a quote-unquote youth initiative umbrella. Though the ad says the initiative, quote, prioritizes the best interests, end quote, of children, and, quote, recognizes the responsibilities it brings, end quote, the document quickly jumps to photos of an internal memo detailing Facebook's plan to create features and settings that are tailored to children as young as 6. Absolutely insane. May of 2022, Wall Street Journal. Facebook held an entire continent's news publisher hostage as a bargaining chip. Facebook documents and testimony filed in the United States and to Australian authorities by whistleblowers allege that Facebook deliberately created an overly broad and sloppy process to take down pages, allowing swaths of Australian government and health services to be caught in its web just as the country was launching COVID vaccinations. So the local fire department, for example, that was putting out advisories or alerts on fire, like let's say in the Australian outback or the edge of the outback, they were gone and people wouldn't get those messages on Facebook if that was their primary mode of delivery of news. And for a lot of the world, that's exactly how that works. Now, the goal, according to the whistleblowers, was to exert maximum negotiating leverage over the Australian Parliament, which was voting on the first law in the entire world that would require platforms like Facebook and Google and others to pay news outlets for content. Zuckerberg's a cheap jerk. He wants to make money, not spend money, so why pay, Australian Broadcasting Corporation or American Broadcasting Corporation money when they can just simply go pound sand and we'll just shut them down. June 2022, from Bloomberg. 8 complaints filed in courthouses across the United States over allegations that excessive exposure to platforms including Facebook and Instagram had led to attempted or actual suicides, eating disorders, and sleeplessness, among other issues. This litigation follows a former Facebook's high-profile testimony, that's Frances Haugen, in Congress, that the company had basically refused to take responsibility for harming the mental health of its youngest users. August 2022, according to Axios, basically Meta that month began telling its news partners in the United States that the company no longer plans to pay publishers for their content run on Facebook news tabs. Facebook was and currently is rampant with disinformation. As I previously reported, they also cut funding and staff for their election watchers, which is basically an open invitation for the world's intelligence communities to start slamming the United States and other countries with even more disinformation. We are literally living through that right now. The only counterweight to that onslaught was actual legitimate news sources, and so by cutting their funding, when they pull out, the only thing that we are left with on Facebook is maybe the occasional news thing if it falls on our feed, and the rest of it is just going to be our crazy uncle somewhere giving us the news according to wherever the heck he found it, right? September of 2022, according to The Intercept, basically in March of 2022, 2 veteran engineers of Facebook found themselves being grilled about the company's sprawling data collection operations in a hearing for an ongoing lawsuit over the mishandling of private information stemming from Cambridge Analytica. The hearing, a transcript which was unsealed, you can go read it, was aimed at resolving one critical issue. What information precisely does Facebook store about us, and where is it? The engineer's response? Well, there's no relief here because essentially they don't know. Facebook is so sprawling, they have no idea. No one person understands where all of the data is. And as I mentioned previously, over 100,000 individual databases of data removed from Facebook by third parties are floating around, and it's probably a heck of a lot more now. Now, Eugene Zarashaw, a Facebook engineering director, replied, quote, "I don't believe there's a single person that exists who could answer that question. It would take a significant team effort to even be able to answer that question." It's insane. January 2023, Ars Technica. At the time, Brazil, in January of 2023, just had a mob storm their government buildings because their former leader, Jair Bolsonaro, lost the election. The election was fueled by false election interference claims that were exploded all over Facebook, and previously Facebook said it was dedicated to blocking content designed to incite more post-election violence in Brazil. But on January 19th of that year, the human rights organization Global Witness published the results of a test that showed that Meta is seemingly still accepting ads that do exactly that. Global Witness submitted 16 ads to Facebook, some of which were calling on people to storm government buildings, others describing the election as stolen, and some even calling for the deaths of children whose parents voted for the new president at the time, Da Silva. Now, that is actually really interesting because Brazil has some of the toughest laws. They threaten and have jailed Facebook and Google executives in their country as retaliation. So Facebook approved of those 16 ads, every single ad except for 2 of them. Global Witness basically, their campaigner, Rosie Sharp, said that proved that Facebook is not doing enough, I would argue pretty much anything, to prevent an enforcement of its ad policies restricting violent content. March of 2023, Reuters, a lawsuit accused Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, as well as its executives and directors, of failing to do enough to stop sex trafficking and child sexual exploitation on Facebook and Instagram. July 2023, according to ABC News, Meta is complicit in human trafficking, according to Florida's Attorney General. Over half of reported incidents of human trafficking in Florida since 2019 involved Meta platforms, according to the Attorney General of Florida. March 2023, Associated Press. Two Democratic members of Congress sent a letter to Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg and ex-CEO Linda Yaccarino, I don't know if she's still there anymore, expressing serious concerns about the emergence of AI-generated political ads on their platforms and asking each one to explain any rules they're creating that basically curb the harms for a free and fair election. Facebook and Instagram did not have a rule specific to AI-generated political ads, but had a policy restricting, quote, faked, manipulated, or transformed audio and imagery used in misinformation. We are right now, as I am recording this, June of 2025, seeing ads generated by AI on Facebook. November 2023, according to CNN, Zuckerberg has personally and repeatedly thwarted initiatives meant to improve the well-being of teens on Facebook and Instagram, at times directly overruling some of his most senior lieutenants, according to internal communications made public as part of an ongoing lawsuit against the company. The newly unsealed communications at that time in the lawsuit, originally filed in Massachusetts, allegedly show how Zuckerberg ignored or shut down top executives, including Instagram CEO Adam Morrissey, the president of Global Affairs, Nick Clegg, who had asked Zuckerberg to do more to protect the more than 30 million teens who use Instagram in the United States. He did nothing. His executives knew they had a problem. They went to him, and he turned them down. November 2023, CNN. We learned that Zuckerberg vetoed a 2019 proposal that would have disabled Instagram's so-called beauty filters. That's a technology that digitally alters a user's on-screen appearance and allegedly harms teens' mental health. It's not alleged anymore. Go read anything that Jonathan Haidt has written in the last couple of years. We now have the longitudinal proof. It is harming teens' mental health by promoting unrealistic body image expectations, according to the unredacted version of the complaint in that Massachusetts lawsuit. Now, after sitting on the proposal for months, Zuckerberg wrote to his deputies in April of 2020, asserting that there was, quote-unquote, demand for the filters and that he had seen, quote-unquote, no data suggesting the filters were harmful, according to the complaint. Screw that guy. November 2023, they've integrated the AI called Meta AI, which is the chatbot feature. You probably have used it. Essentially what they did was they said that they made Meta's AI basically WhatsApp users. They integrated into WhatsApp and essentially adjusted the terms of AI. That literally proves that WhatsApp is not private. It's end to end. The AI can scan and read everything you're doing. And we've also know that they've had third parties in WhatsApp. I've done segment after segment of that as well. They keep saying it's end-to-end encrypted. They say Messenger's end-to-end encrypted. That is directly and absolutely 100% a lie. Now, in December of 2023, according to CNBC, New Mexico's Attorney General alleged in a civil lawsuit basically against Meta and Zuckerberg that Facebook and Instagram created, quote, prime locations for sexual predators and basically enabled child sexual abuse, solicitation, and trafficking. New Mexico Attorney General, Raul Torres, said in a press release that the suit was brought after an undercover investigation allegedly revealed myriad of instances of sexually explicit content being served to minors, child sexual coercion, or the sale of child sexual abuse material known as CSAM. The suit alleges that, quote, certain child exploitative content, end quote, is 10 times, quote, more prevalent, end quote, on Facebook and Instagram as compared to pornography sites such as Pornhub or adult content platform OnlyFans. In other words, Facebook and Instagram are the biggest threats that we have to child exploitation and abuse. January 2024, according to The Guardian, Zuckerberg had been accused of taking an irresponsible approach to artificial intelligence after committing to building a powerful AI system on par with human levels of intelligence. This is known as AGI. Now, Dame Wendy Hall, professor of computer science at the University of Southampton, quote, "The thought of open source, my God, AGI, being released before we have worked out how to regulate these very powerful AI systems is really scary. In the wrong hands, this technology could do a great deal of harm. It is so irresponsible for companies to suggest this." Yes, absolutely. Imagine an ISIS getting an AGI and they figure out how to build homemade nuclear weapons or gas or whatever it is. It's absolutely terrifying in the hands of the wrong person. And Mark Zuckerberg is the wrong person, not to mention ISIS and all of them. June 2024. According to topclassactions.com, Meta agreed to a $68.5 million class action lawsuit to resolve claims that Instagram violated the Biometric Information Privacy Act, or BIPA, of the state of Illinois. Now, the settlement benefits individuals who used Instagram between August of 2015 through August of 2023, so about 8 years of use. Now, according to the class action lawsuit, Instagram violated Illinois users' biometric privacy rights by collecting and storing biometric information without using the proper disclosures and consent agreements. And they agreed to it. They said they did wrong. October 2024, Wired. Basically, Facebook is helping domestic violent extremists. Anti-government militia movements have been continuing to use Facebook to recruit, coordinate training, promote ballot box stakeouts. You remember seeing those guys like in Arizona or wherever, just fully armed next to ballot box, like basically just silently intimidating everybody just trying to vote. And also, and I continue, prepare for a civil war that many militants believe will break out after Election Day. We are past that Election Day now. In some cases, the movement is also attracting people who don't appear to have any prior background in a militia. Meta is even doing the work for them by auto-generating extremist group pages on their behalf. Data shared with Wired by the Tech Transparency Project shows that these groups have continued to grow on Facebook. And we have seen a far-right, basically recruiting effort and explosion in population in the militias, in the neo-Nazis, the Klan, and all of that. Facebook is helping to drive that. January of this year, 2025, Meta is ending fact-checking and removing restrictions on speech across Facebook and Instagram. That's a move that Mark Zuckerberg said was an attempt to restore free expression on the platform. The source of this is Mark Zuckerberg himself in his video that you can go watch. And to quote him directly, "We're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms. More specifically, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes, similar to X, starting in the US," end quote. And for the record, community notes is constantly co-opted by X. It's very easy to get rid of actual fact checkers that would want to even bother with a community note, let alone this. And we are going to continuously see, and already have, an explosion of even more disinformation and anger on this stupid site. And I'm talking about Facebook. Zuckerberg directly referenced Trump several times in that video, criticizing the legacy media for their coverage. He also said that fact checkers, we had become too politically biased, quote unquote, basically just sucking up to the boss. Meta implemented its third-party fact checking function after 2016 and basically said that it was an effort to restrict misinformation and the spread of false news. And this past week, we also learned, according to various sources, that essentially the apps that Facebook had out there were data mining you outside of it. It was going into your phone. It was looking at things. Facebook has said they've now taken that out and they've removed it. But if you have the Facebook app, it could be data mining your phone directly outside of bounds of your Android or your iPhone. It's an absolute mess. Those are the litany of sins. And with that, we're not done, because I want to go with some of the highlights of Mark Zuckerberg himself. All of what I just mentioned as a corporation and the decision Zuckerberg has made as the CEO of Meta are purely awful. But what makes this criminal in terms of the law is that Zuckerberg has repeatedly lied over and over and over about Meta and all of its platforms, what they have actually done. Now, consider the following about him personally. And mind you, these are just the highlights. For a more comprehensive look at just how callous and uncaring he is as a human being, please go see Frances Haugen's work or go read the new book, Careless People, that came out a couple months ago by Sarah Wynne Williams. That's a book that Zuckerberg himself actually sued to stop production on. It's that bad. I've been through it. And quite frankly, Frances Haugen and Sarah Wynne Williams are doing the cyberlord's work here. So let's look at Mark Zuckerberg himself directly, because in 2004, the early days of Facebook, there was a leaked IM transcript with then 19-year-old Mark saying, quote, "Yeah, so if you ever need info about anyone at Harvard, just ask. I have over 4,000 emails, pictures, addresses, SNS." Don't know what that is. Friend's name that was redacted. What? How'd you manage to get that one? Zuckerberg responding, "People just submitted it. I don't know why. They trust me, quote unquote, dumb Fs." Now, we say stupid things at 19, but I think it speaks right out of the gate to his mentality at the start of Facebook. And remember, he started basically as a hot or not ranking site at Facebook for all the women in his class at Harvard. So he eventually admitted that he did say this, for the record. Now, March 10, 2008, in an interview, quote, "Privacy, that's the vector around which Facebook operates." So as early as 2008, only a few years into Facebook, he's saying privacy is at the core of it. We know, and I just proved to you that that's wrong, because in April 2010, Nick Bilton of NYT's Bits blog had an off-the-record conversation with a Facebook employee that was later published by another source. Bilton asked the employee, quote, "How does Zuck feel about privacy?" To which the employee responded with laughter and said, quote, "He doesn't believe in it." There you go. 2010, in an NPR interview, quote, "There's this false rumor that's been going around, which that we're sharing private information with applications, and it's just not true," end quote. We know that's a lie. November 2011, in a Facebook post made by Zuckerberg, quote, "This means we're making a clear and formal long-term commitment to do the things we've already tried to do and plan to keep doing, giving you tools to control who can see your information, and then making sure only those people you intend can see it. As a matter of fact, privacy is so deeply embedded in all of the development we do that every day, tens of thousands of servers worth of computational resources are consumed checking to make sure that on any web page we serve, that you have access to see each of the sometimes hundreds or even thousands of individual pieces of information that come together to form a Facebook page," end quote. That's an absolute lie. Shareholder letter on an IPO filing, quote, "We hope to rewire the way people spread and consume information. We think the world's information infrastructure should resemble the social graph, a network built from bottom up or peer-to-peer rather than monolithic top-down structure that has existed to date. We also believe that giving people control over what they share is fundamentally principle of this rewiring," end quote. That's just a lie. They take your data and they sell it to anybody and everybody. Again, I've just given you the proof. Quote, conference call, July 2014, quote, "I think something that's misunderstood about Facebook. One of the things that we focus on the most is creating private spaces for people that share things and have interactions they couldn't have had elsewhere," end quote. That's a lie. 2018 congressional hearing on Facebook at Cambridge Analytica, which for the record I watched and was one of the most wall-punching things I've watched in probably my entire life. Quote, "I started Facebook. I run it. I'm responsible for what happens here," end quote. And for the record, that under oath in Congress is his statement of ownership over every horrid thing that I have just mentioned. The buck stops with him literally, meaning he publicly is saying that he is liable for the good, the bad, and the ugly that Facebook does. And we can see there are plenty of things here, including aiding and abetting genocides in places like Myanmar. And it's unbelievable that this man is not in jail. 2025. Meta was willing to go to extreme lengths to censor content and shut down political dissent in a failed attempt to win the approval of the Chinese Communist Party and to bring Facebook to millions of internet users. This is according to that new whistleblower, Sarah Wynne Williams, and basically a complaint from a former global policy director. That's who she was. Zuckerberg also agreed to crack down on the account of a high-profile Chinese dissident living in the United States following pressure from high-ranking Chinese officials, and the company basically hoped that official would help them enter China, according to the complaint that was filed in April with the SEC. While he was trying to get in the good graces of the Chinese Communist Party, this is around 2018 for the record, by letting this came to light in 2025 because of Sarah Wynne Williams. But while they were trying to get in the good graces of the Chinese government party, they were going to let them surveil absolutely everybody. He and Meta were saying something entirely different to the Western public, and once the China deal obviously fell through, they started with basically the China bashing. But here's the thing, they were willing willing to say you can bring in your Communist Party officials to run the censorship program, et cetera, et cetera. Go read her book. It's infuriating what these people are doing. So Facebook obviously has a history of simply doing what they want to do without permission, basically, and this is just simply taking from us, from advertising to data mining to allowing enough information on a person to be scraped for psychological profiles for political campaigns, to tracking everything you do while claiming to give you privacy and enhanced security, to putting everybody basically in the world's largest facial recognition database, to storing passwords in plain text that 20,000+ employees could read literally at will, trying to cover up the extent of a whole bunch of things, including war crimes, just bald-faced lies by Zuckerberg. It's time to put Mark Zuckerberg on trial for literal crimes against humanity. And beyond a slap in the wrist, fine. I mean, that's the issue here. They have an operating budget. So when the GDPR in Europe comes in and says, oh, US $3 billion, that's the cost of doing business for them. They don't care. They're pushing $1 trillion in market cap. You think a few billion's going to matter? No, it's got to put them out of business. This is a huge issue. And if we are ever going to get big tech, corralled and controlled, this is the example that it should be, followed by Google for the record. But they should start with Facebook. It's addicted us. It's addicted our kids. It's made the world a much worse place. It is time to put Mark Zuckerberg in jail. And I hope you stuck through this entire video. Take care.